Let's go back to sleep hygiene for a second. We talked about temperature.
Yes.
Nowadays we have these incredible devices that can cool our mattresses and things of that nature. Obviously, we have air conditioning that can cool the room. Do you have a preference for one or the other? I mean, clearly not everybody needs to buy a mattress cooling device if they can't afford it. That shouldn't be an impediment to sleep. So do you have a room temp set? We typically talk about the mid 60s as an ideal room temp. Do you adhere to that?
Yes. Mid 60s is terrific. And if people say, oh, this is just too cold, I say, well, what's too cold? And often they will say my feet. And we have wonderful solutions for that. They're called socks. And we can get really thick socks. And I'm also not opposed to, those tiny little heating pads you can get. They're like this big, like a foot and a half by a foot or something. Putting one of those in the foot of your bed, it's got an auto shut off. It shuts off after like an hour or something to fall asleep with. I don't have a problem with that. There's no issue there. But yes, a cool room is definitely key. And, insert my refrain about down comforters, duvets, etc. Get cotton blankets, get cotton sheets.
And then let's talk about light. Do we need to have it so pitch black you can't see your hand in front of your face? Do we need to block the moonlight? How dark do we need it to be?
Yeah. So this is a common question. If you closed your eyes right now, you'd be able to tell that it's light in this room, right? We can sense light through our closed eyelids. And many women would tell you that their eyelids seem to get thinner as they age, right? So I think an eye mask is a great addition. And this is for a lot of people with early morning awakenings. Eye mask can be a game change because they don't realize that what's causing their early morning awakenings is a little bit of light getting into the wrong part of their eye, indicating it's time to be awake right now. And I don't know the details on what wavelength of light that is or what necessarily the light is coming from, whether it's a light outside from the sun or the moon or whatever it might be. But the point just is a lot of folks with early morning awakening can really benefit from having something covering their eyes, whether it's a sleep mask or there's like hats that go down here now. I'm a big fan of making your room dark. I am one of those people who travels with a roll of black electrical tape because you go to a hotel room and there's like 50,000 lights everywhere.
And you wouldn't just get relief from the eye mask in that situation?
I do, but I'm one of those people who rips my eye mask off in the middle of the night, and I've tried every single eye mask and it's coming off. So I like to wear it. I start with it. I try and keep it on as much as I can. But I also, if there's egregious lights in a room, I cover them with
Meaning like
tape.
You're going to cover the alarm clock or whatever.
Oh, yeah. No, there's none of that in my room.
Yeah.
I don't do that. But back to the cool thing for a second.
My trick is I unplug alarm clocks because I realize sometimes they're so complicated that they just go off in the middle of the night and I didn't realize it. And
Oh, totally. And the microwaves are the worst. Those are the blinking time clocks. But you mentioned the cooling mattress stuff, which I'm intrigued by, but I also am concerned about. It seems that a lot of these mattresses have settings where you can make it cooler, but also you could make it warmer. And I worry about two things. One is I worry about messing with our circadian temperature biology, because you remember in the 1980s for a hot minute when electric blankets were really popular, and all of a sudden they're not. They were starting to see associations between electric blanket use and some cancers. And at the time, there was a lot of speculation that this was related to EMF. But the great thing that time does is it gives us more perspective. And there are some indications that actually that might have been messing with circadian temperature, and that might have been part of the issue. We know that night shift work is carcinogenic, right? So all of these things that
Do we though?
Yeah. Night shift work's been declared a carcinogen.
Well, I mean, no disrespect to the WHO. I don't know what I believe that they say, but I know that there's an association between night shift work and cancer, but do we really know that it's causal?
I think if we go Bradford Hill on this and we look at temporality, I think that there are age-matched case control studies where they can look at people going through different, to control for history effects, right? To see, are people getting more and less cancers? We know it is tricky because if, for example, you look at firefighters, right? They're way more likely to get cancer. They work way more. They have way more chemical exposures. They have way more other things in the mix. But I think that some of the more classic studies have also been done with hospital workers, right? Also confounding effects. But
yeah, and how do we get around the confounding effects of the diet, the obvious dietary shifts that occur in people when they're working under those conditions? I mean,
Totally.
if I think back to how I ate in residency or how I eat after a night of poor sleep, I mean, it's I to me that would be more the cause. I'd put more of that on kind of the metabolic ill health that might result. But carry on.
I think that there's, it's often hard for people to sleep during the day. Making that change from going to sleeping at night to being a person who sleeps during the day, for some people, it's not even possible. You talk to some night shift workers, they sleep very little because they just can't sleep during the day. They're not able to flip their circadian biology. But there's a whole history, and I know we'll probably talk about thermal stuff in a bit, but of looking at disruptions in circadian temperature as one of the most common circadian disruptions in mental health disorders.
Going back to the cancer thing, what is what would be the believed mechanism of action?
I would talk to an oncologist about that, and I would probably talk to a circadian biology person about that. But what I can just speak to is just my understanding that electric blankets are no longer here with us and very common because there were these observed ill health effects, whether they're due to EMF or whether they're due to messing with your body temperature at night. But what concerns me about some of the exogenous interventions like mattresses that might heat up is that there's supposed to be a normal circadian temperature rhythm that we do during the day and during the night. And when we start imposing things on that, my understanding is some of these mattresses can actually be set to cycle at different temperatures during the night and all of these things.
Yeah, I think, so the one that I use, and just by full disclosure, I'm an advisor to that company. The one that I use, you change how cold it is throughout the night. So I think I run it as, I think the settings go from 0 to -10. Like where -10 is the absolute coldest. 0 is no temperature change.
Is that like a point scale or is that degrees?
No, it's a point scale.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I think I get in and I have it at like -5 and then I run it down to -10.
Okay.
And then I bring it up to -5 in the morning. Something to that effect. So I'm taking it from cold to really cold to cold.
Right. Okay. So where my concern is just that my understanding
You're
is that
saying
some
people would heat themselves with these things. Yeah. But that gets to the point which we know we don't want to be warm. We don't want the duvet.
Right. But a lot of people get in bed and they don't like feeling cold because it is easier to fall asleep when your hands and your feet and your skin is warmer. Right. So people will maybe mistakenly do this for more of the night than they should. And I'm just concerned that our circadian temperature rhythm is an exquisitely controlled system, and like a 10-point scale on a device, I think pales in comparison to the complexity of what our bodies need to do in terms of temperature during the night.
I mean, I think the good news is if you can keep your room at 65, none of this matters, right? And if you and the biggest challenge, honestly, is hotels for most people. Is where you have the hardest time controlling temperature.
Hotels are the worst, and there are some mattresses now that are just hot, and there's a short list of mattresses that I just tell people, like, look, that's going to be a hot mattress. Don't get that one. And you want to be really careful to make sure that you can be cool in your bed. And I think the easiest way to do that, if you don't have the money to splurge on, something that's going to be a mattress that's going to definitely be cool, would be keeping your room cool.
What about blue light before bed? So I've looked at these data quite a bit, and I would say that 6 years ago, I sort of was in the camp of every light had to be red. So, I had to have my phone shifted into a red light phase, my computer shifted into a red light phase. I had all of these apps that managed all of this stuff. So as soon as the sun went down, blue light was being removed from my electronics. And I have to say, I sleep subjectively and objectively better today. I say objectively if you can believe what a sleep tracker tells you, but we can bracket that and come back to it. We should. Paying never taking blue light out of my devices, but instead paying attention to what I'm consuming. In other words, my new hypothesis has become, it's not the blue light that is the problem, it's the stimulus that often comes with the blue light. In other words, not looking at social media regardless of light color, is a far greater positive impact on my sleep than looking at those things, but just making sure that there's no blue light coming through.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. What is the role of minimizing blue light when it comes to preparing for sleep?
That's an excellent question. Well, first, I want to completely agree with you. We didn't evolve for the neural experience of Instagram. We're not ready for that, right? Yep. And I think regardless of what color light you're getting your Instagram on, that's probably not helpful before you go to bed. So I think that you're entirely right. I think the larger problem is not necessarily the blue light, but is the thing that we're interacting with, whether it's an iPad or a phone or a computer, because typically those things are going to involve social media, work, email, all of these other things that I think are much more potent disruptors of sleep than the blue light itself. I must caveat this, though. I have had a few patients who have found they were not using Instagram before bed. They were not doing email before bed, none of this.
Not doing anything stressful or stimulating.
No. But, and I just finished with a patient recently like this, who found that using orange colored glasses, and I'm talking orange colored glasses, not those beautiful blue light blocking glasses that are clear lenses that I'm not sure what they're really doing sometimes. Like, I'm talking ugly motorcycle looking orange lenses. And I found that a handful of patients wearing these 2 hours before bed, it completely ameliorates their sleep onset insomnia such that they were able to almost immediately quit Ambien.
The beauty of these interventions is if you can isolate them to one change at a time, you can be empirical about it. And something like wearing glasses is benign. I mean, you're only out the money you spend on them. And if it works, great. And if you really want to test it, take them off and see if your symptoms return.
Exactly.
And if they don't, maybe it fixed you, maybe it wasn't that, who cares? If they return and you can fix it. Yeah, like, again, I try not to be terribly dogmatic about this stuff. But I also sort of think that when people go to great lengths to remove blue light without removing stimulus, they're missing the boat a little bit.
Right.
And, you know, for me, social media is not much of a stimulus, actually, because I don't pay that much attention to it, but work is.
Yeah.
So for me, the single worst thing I can do right before bed is look at email.
Oh, yeah.
If I've like, you know, whereas watching TV, totally like, it's a total beautiful way for me to be distracted by watching, you know, something mindless on Netflix for an hour. And as long as I don't go and check my email and see what got sent to me in the last hour, it'll be great. Doesn't matter that I just finished watching a big bright screen of Netflix. Doesn't seem to impact me.
Totally. Because, well, one is much more interactive and stressful, and one is very passive when you're just watching a movie that has nothing to do with you, no bearing on your life, right? And what I would say, back to your what I'm going to call A/B testing, right? Whenever you want to test one of these individual, what I call low-hanging fruit interventions, you want to collect your own data on a paper sleep diary for 2 weeks. Make the change. You must do it for 2 weeks. And there's a few more low-hanging fruit pieces of sleep hygiene.
By the way, do you have a nice template that people can, like we have one that we give our patients. Again, it's super low-tech. It's a piece of paper.
So low-tech.
Do you have one on your UCSF website?
I can make it public,
Yeah. Okay, maybe we'll link to it in the show notes just so folks.
Easy to do.
And we would link ours as well, but yours is probably better. Ours is like boxes you color in.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like you put C when you had caffeine, you know, A when you had alcohol, E when you exercise. So we're documenting when did you exercise, when did you have food, alcohol, caffeine, and when were you in bed and when were you sleeping by the shading.
Yours might be even more high-tech than mine. But what I will tell you is mine is just enough to get the information that I will definitely act on and nothing else. But I will tell you, can I go over a couple more pieces of low-hanging fruit on sleep hygiene?
Yep.
So back to the glasses. If you are a person who has trouble with what we call early insomnia, so difficulty falling asleep at the beginning of the night, and you're already not looking at your email, not doing Instagram, you're just annoyed that you cannot fall asleep at the beginning of the night, it's worth it to try these glasses for 2 hours a night for 2 weeks and see what happens. It's so easy to do, right?
And to be clear, is there a particular brand? I mean,
I have no affiliations with any of these things. I can tell you there's some really nice ugly ones from lowbluelights.com, I think, if they're still in business. But they look like motorcycle goggles. I do think that the wraparound feature is important because if we're going for it, let's go for it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a worthy thing to do. Another important thing to do is to talk to your physician. I'm not a physician, but I work with a ton of them. And I learned this from an anesthesiologist. All medications have circadian effects. All of them. Somehow, it's probably not known for all of them how they do, but they do. Make sure you are taking your medications at the same time every day and at the right time of day. For example, I once had a patient coming in saying that they were taking 450 milligrams of bupropion for depression before bed. No. Right? That's going to be a pretty stimulating dose of something to take before bed. So make sure that you go over your medications with your doctor and that you're taking them at the optimal times of day and be really consistent with your medications. And another one that is a particularly low-hanging piece of fruit is something called decaffeinated coffee. Turns out there are speculations that decaf coffee can have as much as 15 to 30% of the caffeine that regular coffee has. I haven't found that reference. I've tried to find one that will show that. I haven't found exactly that. But there are some data from 2006 that were published saying that, 15-ish%. But then again, more recent data have shown that Starbucks, I think, says that their 12 ounce has 155 milligrams of caffeine, but outside laboratory testing found like 310, something like that. So when you're decaffeinating coffee that's much more caffeinated than you started with, this can make an absolutely huge difference. I tell people we're done with caffeine by 11. That's my 11 a.m. That's my standard. Unless we've got an extreme phase delay or phase advance, I should define those terms. A phase delay is when you go to bed really late and you wake up really late. A phase advance is when you wake up really early and you go to bed really early. So someone who's waking up at like 3:30 in the morning and going to bed at like 8 p.m., that would be like a phase advance. Phase delay would be like, I'm going to bed at 3 a.m. and I'm waking up at 10 a.m., right? So in those cases, I might do something differential with the caffeine. But for most people who are neither of those, I'll cut it off at 11. And that includes your caffeinated coffee and your decaffeinated coffee. And I never take people's caffeine away. Caffeine withdrawal is not something I want to deal with in my clinic, and I don't think it's necessary. You can cause a lot of damage taking away someone's coffee. People really don't like that. Really puts them in a bad mood, and it's not necessary. So I tell people, do not change how much coffee you're drinking. Put it all before 11, right? Just move it all.
What fraction of people are such rapid caffeine metabolizers that they seem immune to caffeine and sleep?
I think that person doesn't actually exist. I need to be convinced that there are people, the normal caffeine half-life is 4 to 6 hours, right? So even if we take someone who's 4 hours, that means after 4 hours, you still have half of a cup of coffee. And after 8 hours, you still have a quarter of a cup of coffee. And if you have that coffee at 2 p.m., and that coffee actually had 310 milligrams of caffeine in it, and it was only a tall coffee from Starbucks, there's a lot of contingencies to build in here. But I could tell you someone we both just know, actually stops using decaf coffee after dinner, and it's like a world of difference for their sleep quality. People will say, oh, no, I fall asleep just fine. It doesn't affect me. Well, it is affecting you. It's affecting the electrical quality of your sleep throughout the whole night. And I would refer you to talking to like a sleep neurologist to interpret some of those sleep studies and talk with you more about that. For my purposes, all I need to know as the person who's trying to fix the insomnia is, oh, you're having 2 decaf coffees after dinner every night. That could add up and that could be doing something, and that could make your sleep less restful.
Okay. So
low-hanging fruit.
Just stop it at 11 do the experiment at a minimum. Okay. So those are 3.
But don't
Anything
reduce
else?
It is the key thing.
Any other really obvious things to A/B test for 2 weeks.
So do you want to talk about getting off medications, or do you want to leave that and put that in the next?
Let's wrap up all of this, and then I do want to talk about the weaning off, especially the Ambiens and the Lunestas and
all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's the major part. I will tell people also, people like to fall asleep with podcasts on. Don't do that.
Including this one, right?
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is an easy one to fall asleep to, but
I don't know. I hope that people aren't falling asleep listening to this. Although, if this helps them sleep.
One other thing I want to talk about is on the relaxation techniques. Where does or does mindfulness-based practice come into it? So anyone who's done mindfulness-based meditation probably appreciates how difficult it is. It's not like, transcendental meditation where you're focusing on a mantra. You're instead focusing on a sensation, typically breathing. But body awareness is a thing that you want to focus on. Is that counterproductive or is it productive as you're laying there awake?
So my unsatisfying answer to so many questions is always going to be it depends, because there's moderator variables, right? And when it comes to CBTI, what we know is that what's been tested is progressive muscle relaxation, which you could argue is a form of a body scan, which is part of many mindfulness practices, right? Where you scan your whole body, you think about your hands, you notice how they're feeling. Are they warm? Are they soft? Whatnot? And you move through your whole body. With progressive muscle relaxation, you squeeze your hands and you let them go. You squeeze them and you let them go. It's more of an active process that you're paying attention to throughout your body. Doing this in bed right before you fall asleep for a few minutes is fine. That's kind of the one exception to the sleep and sex rule. I tell people that it's also fine to practice this in other parts of your house. You don't have to just be in bed. But the body scan and mindfulness in general has been studied in combination with CBTI. And what the data have shown is somewhat fascinating. There's no actual differential improvement on sleep duration or metrics of sleep. But people like the mindfulness stuff. They report they're more happy with it. They like doing that, right? But in terms of actual improvement on sleep outcomes, I don't think it really adds too much to CBTI. The effects with CBTI are pretty whopping. When it's done well, 50 to 60% of people can get remission, and 70% can get clinically meaningful improvement to their sleep. So in the world of psychological treatments, that's really good. But to circle back to your question, mindfulness is great. I think there's a lot of practical uses for it for helping yourself when you're in psychological states you don't want to be in. It's a great way to be in life. But when it comes to sleep, do I need you to start a mindfulness practice to improve your sleep? No.
So you mentioned 50 to 60% of people are going to have a remission.
Closer to 50, but yeah.
70% will have a meaningful clinical improvement. Of the 30% that do not, why? When does the treatment fail?
The treatment fails when people don't do it.
So in other words, we're really saying 30% of people are not able to adhere to the treatment.
I wouldn't go that far. There are some people who are genetically short sleepers. And at some point, this may become distressing for them. I had a story of a patient who was in her 70s and came to me saying, I have a huge problem. My sleep is not good. And I asked her, okay, so tell me all about this. She was like upper 70s, had a volunteer job in San Francisco, like really active, full workout plan. I'm like, you're crushing it, lady. What's the problem exactly? She says, well, I joined this study and I had to wear this wearable device. And I woke up in the morning and it says that things are not going well every morning after morning. And it says I'm at risk for different things. I'm not going to say which wearable company it was, but, and I said, oh, okay. So there's an
amazing treatment for that. Can I see the wearable device?
Can I please just have that wearable device?
Here's my vice grips.
Boom. Yeah. Exactly. So, and this was a while ago, but I took it away from her because I think, and the wearable devices now are not doing this. This was, oh gosh, 8 years
This
ago.
is actually, I actually wanted to ask, I made a note to ask you this question, which is, when do you tell people, because we do this with our patients, which is take the tracker off. We're doing a 6-month tracker holiday.
Yep.
Done with the tracker.
Done.
So is that kind of mainstay part of your treatment, is like, let's get all that anxiety out of there?
For people with insomnia, I tell them yes. And I do, like, who are coming to me in my clinic, the people who have bothered to wait 1.5 years to get into the clinic, those people, yes, I am telling them that. And so to go back to your 30% of people, the genetically short sleepers who become distressed about their sleep are not going to be helped by CBTI. They're not.
But maybe they shouldn't be helped. Maybe there's nothing to fix.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
But they're presenting, so I'm putting them in the group.
I got it.
And then, yes, we know that there's such a huge body of data on CBTI at this point. It's just wonderfully studied. And we know that when people don't do the treatment, it doesn't work. Adherence is a major, major component. Duration of treatment also matters. It seems that if you do 4 or more sessions with a therapist doing the CBTI, your outcomes are going to be way better than if you try and cut it way short with 1 or 2. My treatment is 5 sessions. I do an intake, you get 5 treatment sessions, and then I do a follow-up where we just tidy things up.
And the space between them is a week?
Always 1 week. I am militant about this. If you're going to miss a week, you can't be in it. You have to wait for the next cycle.